Story 1. Coming from abuse, the love bombing felt amazing. I had no idea what healthy relationships looked like, so I did not recognize the many warning signs. Story 2. She was the one that the animal shelter recommended, since I did not have any other pets. In hindsight, it was a bit of a red flag. Story 3. The love bombing. She was very attractive, extremely funny, full of energy, adventurous, and I liked her dog. Story 4. He was very charismatic and charming. He was confident, had interesting hobbies and many friends. He was attractive and easy to talk to. A few times, random girls warned me about him, such as friends of friends who had known him for a while. I dismissed it, thinking they were either starting drama or jealous because he was good-looking. I learned to always believe women, especially when several of them share the same concerns. I ended up looking very foolish. Story 5. The highs were great, kind, funny, loving. The lows were absolutely terrible. Then they fluctuated every few days or weeks. You wonder, is it good or is it bad? Story 6. They tend to be charismatic, but they give signs from the beginning. You do not have to fall for them. The bad thing is that they deceive very well. Story 7. They mirrored the love I never received. Sweet, obsessive, spellbinding. I mistook possession for passion, control for care. They studied me like prey, and I thanked them for the attention. Story 8. He did not care what other people thought and was bold. He was adventurous and frugal. He was trying to improve his life. He cheated with my sister. He was warm and kind. He put in effort to really get to know me. He was easy to talk to and was very funny. He was gentle and often took on vulnerability for other people. He made an effort to include everyone in conversations. He was a dork but owned it. He was arrested for being a pedophile 2 years later. Story 9. He was the most well-liked person in our circle at the time. He knew how to work a crowd and project the image he wanted to portray. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, he was an absolute mess. Story 10. They pretended to be exactly what I wanted, and I mean really pretended. They lied about their views. They downplayed their involvement in certain things. They agreed with me to draw me in and then became the very thing I despise in many ways. I am still trying to get myself back. Story 11. He was one of the most fun and entertaining guys I have ever met. Witty, smart, charming, the life of the party. He was also extremely talented at painting and had a vast culture. Unfortunately, he had a severe histrionic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, narcissism, and other conditions within cluster B personality disorders. Story 12. This is why I don't bother dating. People hear bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder and run. I don't blame them, but I have had my symptoms under control for years now, and I still have a heart. Story 13. I was young and inexperienced and thought other people would be impressed with how physically attractive she was, despite how mentally and emotionally unpleasant she actually behaved. She actually saved me from prolonged suffering and future emotional trauma by sleeping with my former best friend and roommate. Story 14. She seemed strong as a person. It was only afterward, when I had a much better understanding of her as a person, that I could see all those early signs of strength for what they really were: insecurity and fear. Story 15. All I can say is do not date someone when you are lonely. You will overlook all the warning signs in favor of not being alone. Story 16. The love bombing and adoration felt wonderful. I had never felt so seen before, until the pedestal I was placed on felt like it had requirements, and I was vilified for not meeting their expectations. It was used to control me and who I interacted with. Story 17. He was very attractive, funny, charming, an amazing cook, but also extremely possessive, jealous, and violent. I stayed with him for 5 years. Everyone liked him, including me. I finally escaped to a battered women's shelter after he tried to strangle me to death multiple times. That was 35 years ago. I have not seen or spoken to him since. We had a daughter together, and now she lets him live with her. I have stopped speaking to her as well. I escaped when our daughter was 18 months old in 1990. She thinks he is wonderful. They can have each other. Story 18. He was making a lot of effort to show he wanted to commit to me. He was love bombing, but I have abandonment wounds and did not mind the clingy behavior, so that is on me. Story 19. Similar in every way. Job, music, hobbies, politics, and values. The first red flag was when he became homophobic and racist while intoxicated. Story 20. A lot of attention to detail at the start and always tried to be close to me. I never knew it would turn out to be the most psychotic thing ever. Story 21. She was very intelligent. She wrote poetry and read a lot. She had an extremely large book collection. Eventually, she became combative and at some point delusional. I broke up with her in February, and she still texts me weekly. I do not block her because I want to be gentle. I did not text her for over 2 months at one point, and she continued to message me nearly every day. Story 22. I couldn't discuss this until now. We both had the same experiences as children, so we bonded over that. In my case, all of his manipulation was fueled by his new friends who were involved in Scientology. This was long before most of the disturbing information about that group became public. As soon as I realized he was manipulating me with intimacy and poorly executed mind games, I was able to distance myself and remove him from my life. That was a lifetime ago. I barely remember anything about him. Story 23. His ability to become president. He made many promises about electric vehicle contracts for one of my companies. I overlooked many red flags while we were living together. Story 24. It wasn't one thing, it was a combination of who he was, or pretended to be, actually. I had gotten divorced about 2 years earlier. I had weight loss surgery with many complications. I had been dating a bit and experienced a very traumatic situation on one of those dates. Then he swooped in and made me feel like I was the center of the universe. He knew exactly what to say and do to make me feel safe and loved. I had been busy being lazy, then sick, and I had no idea what life was like outside my own home. For years, I went to work, and the rest of the time I closed myself up in my house, getting online to a safe environment. He made me get out of the house and enjoy life. He made me start being active and trying to live healthier. When he smiled, it lit up the world for me. The abuse started slowly. Little things added up over time. Verbal abuse came first. He told me that nobody else would put up with me because I was so damaged. He yelled at me for stupid things. When I didn't say or do something, he punished me. I remember one night I was making dinner, and we were arguing because his ex had been sending him inappropriate texts. We were broke as hell because he was trying to get on disability, and I was the only one working. At that time, we were down to our last package of ground beef. I had made it into meat sauce to stretch it across several meals. As we argued, he took the pan away from me, dumped it out, and told me that I was complaining so much that he couldn't enjoy dinner and neither could I. The first time I started thinking it might be abuse was when he purposely bruised my legs because I annoyed him. I bruised very easily, so he rationalized it by saying he was just playing and didn't realize he'd hit my legs hard enough to bruise them. It just got worse from there. We got married on June 19th that year, and on August 7th, he was arrested by the Federal Bureau of Investigation at my work for molesting his daughter on camera and sending it to an undercover Federal Bureau of Investigation agent. My life was in ruins, and I found out that everything he told me had been a lie. While he was in jail waiting for trial, I filed for annulment and started rebuilding my life. I didn't realize that my life being in ruins was actually my life starting over for real this time. Story 25. Psychopaths do such a thing as negging. They put you down and make you feel inadequate, which triggers your approval-seeking tendencies. These individuals know how to spot susceptible people since it never works on people with healthy outlooks or lives. Story 26. Like a true sociopath, he read me like a book and spoon-fed me everything I wanted to hear. He seemed perfect, if I'm being honest. After he finally showed his true colors, I felt like I was crazy or stuck in the twilight zone. I cried literally every day for 2 years. After it was over, I was a wreck. It took me more than a decade to trust myself again. I still don't trust just about anybody outside of my immediate family. Being deceived like that really messes with your head. Story 27. I had a period of about 10 years where I almost exclusively dated women who could ruin my life. It was fun. Story 28. They seemed to put me at the center of their world rather quickly. They acted like they really cared about who I was and what I would tell them in conversations. Then, once they had me secured as a girlfriend, that caring mask dissolved into a "you are the problem" gaze. Story 29. They were charming and, at the time, looked like someone out of a dark romance novel. I was freshly 19 and had just been kicked out of my mother's house. I should have been smart, but at the time I was being heavily abused by my mother and fell into my ex's lap. What should have tipped me off was that they had the same birthday, mannerisms, and so on. So, yeah, not a great way to spend 14 years. Story 30. Six-pack abs, dark features, and a jawline that could cut glass. Turned out to be a psychopathic chiropractor. Story 31. Well, for one, he was not upfront with me about his severe mental health issues until we were a few months into the relationship. Schizoaffective disorder and borderline personality disorder. He was also a drug addict and alcoholic. When we first started talking, I thought he was really sweet and a gentleman. He was my very first relationship, and I fell for him quickly and deeply. This ended up being the relationship that made me very cautious about any future relationships. His mother was also a nightmare. He was verbally abusive and almost became physically violent with me. I felt trapped because we had moved in together during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I felt isolated from my family. Story 32. I had low self-esteem and he love-bombed me. He was also well-traveled, and I thought someone so worldly must really see something in me to fall for me. In reality, he was psychotic, a stalker, and a pedophile. Story 33. They were attractive and confident. We had a close relationship. They would text me frequently, and we would go to the gym together. They would look at me meaningfully. Looking back, they were texting me a lot because they were keeping track of me. That made me step back and reconsider what was really happening. Story 34. Love bombing. I had very bad insecurity about myself, and she made me feel seen. 3 years of therapy post-breakup, and I have grown so much since then. Story 35. Love bombing in my first relationship made me simply think they really liked me, and suddenly I grew actual authentic confidence in myself. Now, story 36. She had great breasts. Seriously, I was pretty shallow. She had a great figure and was interested in me. That was enough. Story 37. After leaving an abusive relationship, his kindness made me fall hard. He was sweet and cared about me, or seemed to, and I was so used to being treated poorly that I ignored red flags others might not have. Story 38. He was very charismatic. Everyone loved him and wanted to be around him. I was one of them. To summarize a 10-year abusive story, he attempted to kill me multiple times. People hated me for leaving him because they all loved him so much. Story 39. I would encourage everyone to read about borderline personality disorder. All these comments come directly from their playbooks. Story 40. He was truly psychotic. My own mental health issues at the time contributed to the disaster, which I was able to escape with help. Story 41. I felt we were strangely similar, and I felt I could be myself. He wanted more of my natural and true self, including my flaws and weaknesses, and he really accepted all of me. He did not want to hear the good things, my strength, or my wins. He wanted the bad and accepted it as if he truly understood me. Guess where that acceptance went? Story 42. As my best friend hates when I say this, he was there. Simple as that. I swiped on him, he swiped on me, and he could hold a conversation. Literally all it took. Story 43. I was lonely and didn't know any other gay girls. She said romantic-sounding things to me after a few hours of hanging out. I thought she was in love and that there was no possible way I would ever find another girl who would be willing to be in love with me. We were both 14 to 15 years old, which explains why I didn't see any red flags. I am not comfortable calling her a psycho since we were just kids and she did not physically hurt me, but she was a terrible girlfriend who treated me like an emotional punching bag. She threatened to hurt herself anytime she felt I was going to break up with her. She was certainly not normal. Story 44. They were extremely charming, sweet, and thoughtful at first. I later learned that was just love bombing. Story 45. She was very funny, and the intimate moments were enjoyable. However, she was emotionally damaged from a difficult childhood and pushed away everyone who tried to get close to her. Story 46. We were very similar. She gave me a lot of attention and made me feel loved. Felt like we were meant for each other. I sometimes think back and wonder if she intended it to feel that way for me. Story 47. The way they treated me was familiar because my father was abusive. Thank God for therapy and doing the work. Story 48. It was the first relationship I had ever been in. I was 17 and had really begun enjoying talking with this one alternative-looking girl. A redhead, just really fun to talk and joke with. I loved her style and look at the time. Now I think, laughing my face off, wow. Story 49. I loved his deceased daughter. I thought I could save her and myself because she had no one. I also had no one. I am still haunted by how naive I was. I talked to her almost every day. I almost lost everything. Story 50. She basically jumped over me in my parents' living room after a 10-minute conversation that was not even sexual. We were both young. She was unstable but broken and sad. It was confusing. Story 51. He was attentive to my needs and the only person who would listen at first. But eventually, the mask slipped, and he became a monster. Story 52. Did not know what borderline personality disorder was. Never had more in common with Johnny Depp. It started with love bombing and sex bombing, appearing to be entirely focused on you to such an extent you have never felt that level of focus and love from another woman other than your mother. It is amazing. You think that is the real them because that is the person you saw first and got to know. Then they become stressed or suffer from anxiety or have some excuse for why they start treating you like a monster taking advantage of them, and you try to figure out what is going on to get back to the real person. Except that was never the real person. That was a mask, a bait and switch, a skin they wear to attract people, a role they are very good at, and the longer it takes you to realize that, the more your life can suffer. Unless you have experienced it or have a master's degree in psychology, you may not even know people can be like that. It is not a fun education. I recommend learning about it before experiencing it in order to avoid it. Story 53. Crazy in the head, crazy in bed. I found out the hard way that this is a true statement. Finding someone passionate in bed in your 20s is very alluring. Also, borderline personality disorder usually does not cause any issues. In fact, it often causes infatuation in the first 4 to 5 months. I had a woman who was into me and who was passionate for about 5 months. I did not know about borderline personality disorder, so the next 6 months were difficult as I tried to figure out what I was doing wrong. Story 54. Energetic women are exciting in the bedroom, in the car, and in random public places. There is never a dull moment, but sooner or later, there is a price to be paid. If you choose to be with an energetic woman, have an exit strategy in place from the start. Story 55. It might be the Florida in me, but a pretty chubby goth girl who was clearly just as attracted to me was hard not to engage with. I tried to pull back several times to protect my feelings, but she reassured me and showed nothing but sweetness at every turn. I loved her and felt the same back, but it turned out to be a game. After dumping me and going no contact, she reached out and not only couldn't remember why she dumped me, she mocked me, acted like she still cared, and proceeded to block my number. I tried reaching out through other channels and learned a lesson. Today, a sheriff visited me with a temporary restraining order. Yes, I reached out through different social media to try and work through my hurt, but there are 2 other claims that are verifiably false. I have responded with screenshots and will see her in court. Story 56. She was attractive, personable, had a nice family, and a big group of friends. She also had gonorrhea, which she tried to blame on me. After I tested negative twice, I broke up with her. She begged me to take her back, and I foolishly did. After her treatment, we stopped using protection. She assured me everything was okay. A few weeks later, I contracted herpes. When I tried to end the relationship again, she suddenly claimed to be pregnant. That turned out to be a lie. Overall, it was a horrible experience. I didn't think I would date again, Story 57. He was charming and handsome. I thought he was out of my league. That says more about my self-perception than his looks or personality because it turns out he was a manipulative abuser. I did not see it when it was only emotional. Story 58. Her extremely innocent demeanor and appearance stood out. She had an angelic voice and was very sweet. Eventually, she became extraordinarily mean and revealed herself to be quite narcissistic in ways most men would not understand. She undermined, emasculated, and overstepped every boundary, never opening up to me emotionally or sexually. It really affected me. I dated her for 7 weeks but broke up with her twice during that time, and she broke up with me 4 times. I was 30, and she was 29. Story 59. Made me feel safe, great to talk to, and intelligent. Good-looking and athletic too. The mask started to drop a couple of years into the marriage when we moved away from family and friends. It turned out to be completely unstable and scary. I should have left way sooner. Story 60. He was handsome, a good dancer, and physically the right size in terms of height and age. What I did not know was that he had a personality disorder. Story 61. I do not know if being a sociopath counts, but if it does, he was really attractive. He looked like James McAvoy, and I was newly single after my first marriage. As we got closer, it felt like being in the eye of a hurricane. I saw how he was with others outside the eye, and it terrified me. I knew the safest place to be was close. Story 62. His extreme intelligence. He was also tall and could fix anything. He was a true sociopath. I overlooked so much because I wanted to believe him. Story 63. We were young. Appearance-wise, she was a 5. But her sexual energy made her a very lively 5. And it was a lot of fun at first. Then the mask came off and everything fell apart. Story 64. I dated a woman for about a year. For 99% of the time, she was lovely, kind, caring, and shared my hobbies and interests. She was a great person to be around. However, for the other 1% of the time, she was a different person. Angry, abusive, violent, and controlling. I stayed because I kept making excuses, thinking she must just be having a bad day. Eventually, I had enough and left. She became obsessive and stalked me for almost 2 years. It took multiple police visits to get them to take it seriously and put a stop to it. Story 65. She was intelligent. We could discuss topics I was interested in that my friends and previous girlfriends could not engage in. Ironically, the abuse led to isolation. Story 66. I thought he was interesting and unique. It turned out he was struggling with a serious addiction and lacked any shame or empathy. Story 67. Attention. I was lonely, feeling unattractive, and seeking any man's validation. He emotionally tortured me for a year. I had never met him in real life, but I was in love and couldn't simply block him. I also became somewhat addicted to the drama and chronic sadness. Story 68. He was tall, had good facial hair, smoked weed like I did, was very attractive, and had 2 amazing dogs. I was also a bit wild at the time in my own way, so the sex was great. I was still living at home and being abused by my parents, which he obviously noticed quickly and used to his advantage. It took me years to get over it and see it for what it actually was. Story 69. It was not so much that I was attracted to any part of him, but more that I had incredibly low self-esteem and did not attract many people at all at the time. So when a man with an outgoing personality asked me out, I said yes. I just went along with everything. The physical abuse started. Then he convinced me that no one else would ever like me, and I believed him. What frightens me about him the most, and what I did not realize at the time, is that he collected people like me. Meek, people-pleasing, quiet, low self-esteem individuals. He treated me the same way he treated his friends. We would side-eye each other but never stand up for ourselves or each other. Until one of them spoke up, called me, and told me what he was doing. Turns out that animal abuse is where I draw the line. Story 70. He was obsessed with me, and having suffered from depression with no friends or support, it felt amazing to have someone so into me. Story 71. Honestly, he just seemed cool and smart. The field I used to work in attracts a lot of arrogant and unstable people who get by on charisma alone, and he had a lot of charm and less of the foolishness. We broke up 7 years ago because he eventually turned out to be emotionally abusive and extremely lazy. He became a teacher. I only found this out recently because he was arrested on several charges of child molestation involving multiple victims, and it was reported in the news. So he is far more dangerous and evil than I originally thought. I dodged several bullets, but it is very upsetting to be associated with him. Story 72. He reflected me back to myself. Even at the beginning of the end, he was purchasing the same albums I had on repeat for a year straight. He pretended, but everything I liked and everything I was eventually became what he hated, and it is obvious he hated me all along. Story 73. Gosh, he was just so incredibly kind and thoughtful. So perceptive. He picked up on every little mood of mine and did anything to make me happy. Yes, it turns out that is love bombing too. The kindness was the act of a truly masterful manipulator. The precise perception was used to punish me if I was not sufficiently cheerful, grateful, or impressed. Story 74. They seemingly saw through everyone and appeared to be on my side. I was surrounded by unpleasant people at the time, but it turns out they were the worst of them all. Story 75. Their charisma and confidence, that was just narcissism. Their new way of thinking was sociopathy. Story 76. This is kind of unfair. More often than not, they originally were not a psycho. The world is tough and people change a lot over time. People can actually be normal until a psychotic break due to trauma. Being a psycho is not a permanent state, and most things in life are recoverable and can heal. Trust is difficult to rebuild, and if that bond is broken, the relationship often cannot be the same. However, you can still forgive the person. I assume this post is primarily manipulated by a person with antisocial personality traits in its current state. Sociopaths and narcissists can be attractive and interesting initially because of how focused they are on what they want and how they appear. These traits are often seen as advantages in relationships, but they ultimately care only about themselves and view others as accessories for their purposes. This psychopathy can be corrected, but it requires a significant ego death and self-actualization. Essentially, it involves transforming something deeply wired in the brain to its opposite. Story 77. I think most of you are describing people who hurt you and didn't give you closure because they were going through something or you just weren't compatible. I've had my life dramatically altered by bad people outside of romance twice. I identified the third and saved myself a lot of dignity when they were found out. I'm comfortable trusting my gut at this point. I've also been unstable during some romances because I hated myself or suppressed emotions and exploded. Signs that someone isn't a good person. 1. Dead eyes, or eyes that don't match the expression they're showing. Start speaking negatively about others early on. Quick to blame others for anything, and I mean quick like early on. Shows no critical thinking about their emotions, no accountability. They don't treat others well when working toward their goals. Their ambition takes precedence over their humanity. Everything else, in my experience, is subjective, mood-based, and just a sign you're not good for each other or they have serious work to do on themselves. If you're worried about ending up with someone bad, you're either naive or you have your own issues to resolve before you can put yourself out there responsibly. If you're comfortable reducing someone's pain and behavior to psycho because they're not reciprocating what you want, you're being unrealistic and lacking compassion. You will inevitably be tested in moments of deep vulnerability or genuine stress. If you can write full sentences while asking how to avoid falling for bad people, you might need to analyze your own questionable behaviors. You need to learn how to trust yourself, support yourself in moments of loneliness, and find ways to meet your needs so you don't make poor decisions. Otherwise, you become vulnerable to toxic people. I overthink and feel intensely, but if you feel swept off your feet immediately, it's a good sign it's not going to end well unless you start regulating and paying attention. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.